if approved by this House,
Yes.
and if appointed and sworn in to serve in the capacity of the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, 100 days.
We will hold you to that if you get there.
Yes. May I answer something about the Advocates Complaints Commission?
Yes.
The Advocates Complaints Commission is also under the Office of the Attorney General, but the Disciplinary Tribunal is not under the Attorney General. There is a need for the Office of the Attorney General to review the capacity, the structure of the Advocates Complaints Commission, because they only have one panel that is sitting now. If approved for this post, I would also think that there is a need for us to sieve the cases that go through the Complaints Commission so that the very trivial ones do not clog the system. We only deal with the more complex ones. But otherwise, there's a need to take an audit and come up with good resolutions on how we can structure the department. Thank you.
All the questions answered? Okay, so we can now move. Your question, which one?
Questions.
By Honorable Mokami, I think it was about the mothers and vulnerable people who are in prison. Is it?
And the fight against corruption. Yeah, in the economic crime.
Do you remember it, nominee, or do you want her to
Yes,
repeat?
I do remember.
Okay.
Yes. About the mothers, the young people, and the children who are in custody, they are clients of the Director of Public Prosecutions, but the Director of the Public Prosecutions is using the tools that are available to him. So issues of expediting hearing of cases, issues of making pretrial detention shorter, legal representation, are not within the purview of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And that is the reason why, as the Attorney General, this is an area that I'm passionate about. I am going to do all it takes to come back to this Parliament to persuade you that we need to relook at our criminal justice laws. I do not think, from the heart that I wear, that we are achieving the purposes of punishment, being retribution, rehabilitation, and restoration. Is the prosecution the weakest link in the fight against corruption? I was asked. The criminal justice system acts as a chain, and each one of us has a role to play. I know that the sector has been suffering from capacity, budgetary allocation, sometimes inadequate or insufficient investigations. If approved as the Attorney General, I will bring in other tools to help in the fight against corruption. One, we would strengthen the operationalization of Chapter 6 of the Constitution by clarifying what government agencies can do. We will use the forums that we have, like the NCAJ, where the Attorney General sits, to review the process of hearing of corruption cases. It has to be shortened, and I'm happy to report that as a prosecutor, I know the President has recommended shortening of the time that corruption cases should be heard. There is also a need for us to use a tool called asset forfeiture and confiscation so that we take out the profits from the accused persons. If that tool was used, we'll make crime to be less attractive to the accused persons. We will also try to share resources and enhance the capacity of the officers. So each of the criminal justice sector agencies is suffering from something, but if we work together collaboratively, supported by this House, we'll be able to put in mechanisms to deal with corruption. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Mishi, Honorable Raso, and Honorable Mule in that order.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, before my question, I also want to add what our nominee has just said, that it is one of the areas where if approved, she's going to put some reforms on the issue of presidential pardon. Because what we have been seeing, it is done politically. Those who have demonstrated that they have reformed and they need to have that presidential pardon, they don't access that. So while you say you have a passion on that area, on the prisoners, please also include the issue of presidential pardon. And Honorable Chairman, my question will also be on corruption, but in a different angle. And I just want to say that despite that we have so many laws regarding corruption, what are you going to ensure that there is consistently enforced? Because the problem here is enforcement, or rather implementation of the laws which have already legislated. And on the same perspective, how are you going to protect whistleblowers and witnesses who come forward with information about corrupt cases? On the same breath, one of the areas which we have found, there is a lot of corruption and wastages, it is on public procurement. So how are you going to ensure that you protect public funds, you also ensure there is transparency, there is accountability, so that at least the issue of austerity measure can be achieved? I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Russell. Honorable Russell.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Senior Counsel, you rightly said justice is expensive. And indeed, it is in our country. Our courts or our judiciary borrows heavily from other jurisdictions. When you look at America, they have the People's Court, trial by jury. These are many areas that actually make it that the citizenry are able to access justice speedily. If you are confirmed, would you find it favorable to have battery of lawyers in the state law office, that Kenyans actually could go to the state law office and get counsels or advocates who can represent them in court in actually at a fee, where many Kenyans are able to access justice? Secondly, it is in the area of court reforms. If you look currently, there are many emerging issues: cyber crimes, cryptocurrency crime, bullying on the internet. There are many things that today is facing the world, and Kenyans are not exceptional to that. If you are confirmed by the House, would you find it favorable to actually have new courts that address these frontiers? These are teething issues to the Kenyan. And finally, what is your opinion on alternative dispute resolution? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Stephen Mule.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, nominee. The Office of Public Trustee operates within the organizational framework of the Division of the Administrator General in the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. Despite this, the public has limited access and knowledge of the public trustee services. What initiative are you going to put in place to communicate to the public to offer services from this office? And you know very well, the President has been on record saying that there has been very poor communication on what government is doing, it can do to the public. I want to hear your views.
Nominee, you can answer those three.
Presidential pardon. Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I was privileged to chair, on behalf of the Attorney General, presidential pardons for about 10 years before the Power of Mercy Committee. I can assure you, Honorable Speakers and Honorable Members, when I chaired on behalf of the Attorney General, we did what was required under the law. The Power of Mercy Committee falls under the Office of the Attorney General. I would expect that the Power of Mercy Committee acts in accordance with public interest, good governance, and in the interest of the administration of justice. From the information given today, if confirmed or if approved, that is one of the areas that we'll relook at on what legislation or how they dispense their mandate. The issue of corruption, Honorable Speaker and Honorable Members, corruption has been defined and corruption is a crime. The Director of Public Prosecution prosecutes what has been taken to him by investigating officers. The law requires him to either prosecute, to order further investigations, to take back or to close. I want to assume that whichever action that he takes, it is done in the public interest and in the interest of the administration of justice. Tools like whistleblower legislation are very important in the fight against corruption. I am informed, I am aware that a whistleblower legislation is underway and that will assist the fight against corruption. I am aware that the Witness Protection Agency is in place, but it lacks capacity. It was a department within the office of the DPP, but it was made independent. It is contributing to the fight against corruption and organized crime, but it lacks capacity. Since the Attorney General also superintends the Witness Protection Agency, we will review the structure and the requirements and the challenges of the Witness Protection Agency, and together with other justice actors, we will come back to you on the way forward, because I think it will still need budgetary allocation. Justice is expensive, and we need court reforms because of emerging issues. Honorable Speakers and honorable members, we have emerging issues in criminal law and civil law, political and economic laws. However, issues like cryptocurrency have not yet been legislated or regulated. As we speak today, I am assisting a neighboring country to come up with regulations on virtual assets and virtual asset providers, which include cryptocurrency. I hope that, if approved or confirmed to my position, I will use my expertise to recommend to government that we need regulations and laws in the new emerging areas. But we also must encourage alternative dispute resolution because it's provided for under the Constitution. They, to some extent, produce quality justice where courts is not involved and where the parties agree to go to alternative dispute resolution. And that is the reason why when it comes to criminal law, I was also speaking about alternatives to prosecutions that can be embraced, including diversion, deferred prosecution agreements, alternatives to trial, let's say plea bargaining, but in a way that it satisfies the administration of justice and public interest. Thank you. About public trustee, I had spoken about public trustee, but it is one of the services that, if confirmed as the Attorney General, as a quick win, we will make sure that it is cascaded to all the counties, 47 counties, and I hope that the Director of Public Prosecutions will be good enough to share his resources with us, even if we start with this one, because it will decrease the number of cases that go to court, and it will shorten the time within which we resolve issues. I also know that the public trustee is supposed to help mediation in inheritance matters, but since they are not on the ground, they cannot do that. So it is a very, very important service that should go to the people. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to follow up on what Honorable Rahab talked about women. And there is something I was bringing, but it was declared unconstitutional. A penal code. Would you consider because she has talked about women in jails, and women go with young children to prison. Would you consider bringing legislation to remove the children from the prison, the under fives? How would you take it so that we do not have women who are serving sentence with children under 5 in the prisons?
Russell?
Chair, part of my question has not been answered.
Which one?
This is about the wastages on public procurement. And Chairman, I've asked this question because I'm putting a reference on what happened during the COVID-19 period, whereby we lost a lot of billions of money in terms of purchasing of masks. And I don't know how, as an AG, you're going to be advising the government in terms of public procurement. So I've not had any answers from her.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Senior Counsel, my follow-up question, which you did not really answer, is the issue of legal aid. To have battery of lawyers in the state law office so that many Kenyans can access justice, so that lawyers are affordable and individuals can approach any court. It doesn't matter who they are in society. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Speaker, there's someone who has asked me to ask this question, and I think it's a fundamental one. Nominee, under the Office of the Attorney General Act, Section 15, the Solicitor General shall assist the Attorney General in the performance of the duties of the Attorney General, and it prescribes how. What do you think if the executive or the president overrides you or works directly to get advice from the Solicitor General and not from you if you are approved by this committee and the National Assembly?
About women in prison. Honorable Speakers and honorable members, I know that women sometimes are detained in prisons and they have children. And I talked about the conditions of detention of vulnerable people within the criminal justice sector. It is not only women, but if you go to police stations and prisons, you'll hardly see detention facilities for children, for women, for men, demarcated, even for the disabled. So there is a need to relook at the whole criminal justice sector and the conditions of detention so that we can dignify people who go through them. Wastages of public, under public procurement. Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, public procurement is one area that gives birth to many cases of corruption. There is a need to ascertain that all MDAs and government institutions adhere to the requirements of Public Procurement Act, and it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to advise them on how to adhere to the requirements of the legislations. So it would be my duty to advise the MDAs and government agencies on what is required of them should we find that the legislation is not adequate. For example, I know that under the Public Procurement Act, Section 134, contracts of above 5 billion are the ones that are approved by the Attorney General. The rest are done by the MDAs, but sometimes they end up to be the ones that have been more impactful negatively. So there will be a need to look at the whole of that regime and see how effective we can be. About the SG, I think if I'm confirmed as the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, I take the view that the Attorney General is the head of the functions that are prescribed under the Constitution. The structure and how the Attorney General's office will work will depend on how a particular Attorney General structures, because if everything goes by, with, and on the signature of the holder of the office. So it will depend on the structure. But if the functions are given to you by legislation, then you are answerable to them. So I think it will depend on personalities, not really, but